He insisted he had never been in the basement, yet his shadow on the security feed had been standing there for over an hour. I stared at my tablet screen, the pixels trembling as they formed a familiar silhouette, broad shoulders, head slightly bowed, arms hanging limp at his sides like a marionette with cut strings. The time code in the corner mercilessly ticked away the seconds, 3:15 a.m. At that very moment, I was lying upstairs in our bedroom, tucked under the duvet he had adjusted before bed, believing my husband was asleep beside me. But Roman was down there, in the damp darkness, amidst boxes we still hadn't unpacked after the move. He was just standing there. He wasn't rummaging through things, wasn't smoking, wasn't on the phone. He stood facing the blank concrete wall, and his stillness was more terrifying than if he had been sharpening a knife. It was the stance of a man either praying to an unknown god or waiting for a portal to hell to open. I zoomed in, trying to discern his expression, but the infrared camera turned his eyes into two black hollows. My fingers turned to ice, and the tablet nearly slipped from my grasp, hitting the edge of the kitchen table with a dull thud that, in the silence of the house, sounded like a gunshot. That morning, the kitchen greeted me with the smell of stale coffee and the sterile cleanliness Roman maintained with maniacal persistence. Every cup in the cabinet was turned with the handle to the right, towels hung in perfect alignment, and not a single crumb marred the faux stone countertop. I sat on a high stool, feeling the cold seep through the thin fabric of my pajamas, and replayed the video in my head. We had bought this house 3 months ago, a dream, not an investment, according to the realtor, a slippery character with shifty eyes. The basement was the only place I didn't like. It smelled of earth, mold, and something sickly sweet, like rotting apples, though no apple trees grew nearby. Roman immediately said he would handle the lower level himself, claiming it was dangerous due to old wiring, and hung a heavy padlock on the door, keeping the key on his ring along with his car keys. "There's nothing for you to do down there, Eve," he had said with that soft, patronizing smile that made my jaw clench. "You know how clumsy you are, you'll fall down the stairs." I believed him. Or pretended to, because it was easier than fighting his care, which suffocated me like a down pillow. But yesterday, when he forgot his phone in the car, I saw a notification from the security system, motion in zone 4. When Roman came down for breakfast, he looked impeccable, a pressed blue shirt, the scent of expensive aftershave, fresh and rested. He kissed the top of my head, a gesture that once seemed like love but now felt like an owner branding his property. "Did you sleep poorly, sweetie?" he asked, pouring himself orange juice. "You have circles under your eyes." His voice was velvet, enveloping, the voice of a man who never lies. I gripped my cup until my knuckles turned white and forced a smile. "Nightmares," I lied, watching his reaction closely. "Dreamt someone was walking around the house." Roman didn't even blink, his hand holding the butter knife remained steady. "It's all your imagination, Eve. Did you stop taking the vitamins I bought you? The neurologist warned that your anxiety could return." He masterfully shifted the blame, making me feel guilty and sick, but this time I noticed his pupils constrict for a split second, and the corner of his mouth twitch in a barely perceptible tick. He knew I sensed something, but he was certain I was too weak to grasp the truth. I remember how we met 2 years ago. I was broken after a messy divorce, had lost my job and my self-belief, and he appeared like a life raft in a stormy sea. Roman took on everything, my debts, my fears, my decisions. He was an architect who built beautiful, sturdy houses, and I thought he would build our life just as solidly. But looking back now, I could see the cracks in the foundation. His care always went hand in hand with control. First, he insisted I quit my job because a woman of your talent shouldn't slave away for pennies. Then he gently weeded out my friends, finding flaws in each of them. One was jealous, another drank too much, the third was a gossip. I was left alone in a golden cage, surrounded by comfort and his all-seeing eye. And this basement. The restricted zone. Why was he standing there? What did he see in that wall? Was he hiding not things, but someone? Or something that could shatter our picture-perfect life? The thought that I was living with a stranger pierced me like a sharp needle of fear. During the day, after Roman left for the office, I decided to do what had previously seemed unthinkable, defy his direct order. I knew he kept duplicates of all keys in the safe in his study, the code to which I had accidentally seen when he was drunk after an office party. 4 digits, his birth year. Such banal narcissism. The safe opened with a quiet beep, and I found a small ring with a key marked with red electrical tape. My heart hammered in my throat, my palms sweating. I felt like a thief in my own home. Approaching the basement door, I froze for a second, listening to the silence of the house. The refrigerator hummed, water dripped somewhere, wind rustled outside, but no sound came from behind the door. I slid the key into the lock, the metal scraped, and the mechanism yielded. The heavy door swung open, and a wave of dampness hit me, carrying that same sickly sweet smell, now intense, as if someone had spilled cheap perfume over a pile of rotting leaves. I descended the wooden steps, each one creaking as if warning me, "Don't go, don't look, don't know." It was dark at the bottom, light from a narrow window near the ceiling barely cut through the grime. I turned on my phone's flashlight, the beam picking out concrete walls, shelves with tools arranged by size, and stacks of cardboard boxes. Nothing unusual. No bodies, no secret labs, no altars. Just a basement. I walked to the center of the room, to where his shadow had stood on the video. The floor here was clean, dust-free, as if mopped daily. I shined the light on the wall he had been facing. Smooth gray concrete. But when I stepped closer and ran my hand over the cold surface, I felt a strange vibration. A faint hum coming from inside the wall. And something else, at eye level on the concrete, there was a tiny, almost invisible scratch, as if someone had marked days with a fingernail. Or tried to pry something open. Suddenly, the front door slammed upstairs. I froze, killing the flashlight, and darkness instantly swallowed me, dense and suffocating. Roman's footsteps were heavy, confident. He was back early. 3 hours early. Panic washed over me in an icy wave. If he found me here, I couldn't explain why I had the key. I couldn't make excuses. His care would turn into rage, and Roman's rage was quiet and terrifying, like the calm before a tsunami. I pressed myself into the shadows behind a shelving unit, praying he wouldn't come down. Steps approached the basement door. A pause. I heard his breathing, heard the jingle of keys. He was checking the lock. I had forgotten to lock it back, I had just pulled the door to. If he tried the handle. Seconds stretched like rubber. Then I heard him grunt, and his footsteps receded toward the kitchen. I exhaled, my knees trembling, but I realized, I was trapped. I needed to get out of here unseen and return the key to the safe while he was eating lunch. I escaped by a miracle. Waiting for the moment the coffee machine whirred to life, I slipped up the stairs barefoot, clutching my shoes in my hands. I managed to close the door, turn the lock, and dart into the living room, dropping the key into my cardigan pocket. When Roman entered the room with a cup of coffee, I was sitting on the sofa with a book, holding it upside down. "You're pale," he noted, sitting beside me. He smelled of the outdoors and another woman's perfume, faint, but my fear-heightened senses caught it immediately. "Headache again?" I nodded, afraid to trust my voice. "I brought you new pills," he said, pulling an unlabeled vial from his pocket. "The doctor said this is the best on the market, specifically for your type of neurosis. All natural ingredients." He poured 2 yellow capsules into his palm. "Drink." It wasn't a request. It was a command disguised as concern. I looked at the capsules and understood, if I swallowed them, I would become a cotton-stuffed, obedient doll again, sleeping 12 hours a day and asking no questions. I swallowed the pills but didn't wash them down. I hid them in my cheek, just as I had done with tasteless porridge as a child. Later, in the bathroom, I spat them into the toilet and watched the yellow spots dissolve in the swirl. That was the moment my game began. I had to pretend I was taking his medicine, that I was becoming calmer, that I believed every word he said. But inside, a cold, calculating fury was growing. That evening, I called my old friend Laura, whom I hadn't spoken to in 6 months. "I need help," I whispered into the phone, standing under the shower so the noise would mask my voice. Run a background check on a firm for me. And find out what kind of drug comes in unmarked yellow capsules. Laura asked no unnecessary questions, for which I was grateful. She had always said Roman had dead fish eyes, and I used to laugh and call her jealous. God, what a fool I had been. The next few days turned into a hellish Groundhog Day. Roman was the perfect husband, cooking dinners, massaging my feet, asking how I felt. But every night, at exactly 3 a.m., he would get up and go to the basement. I no longer watched the cameras. He had revoked my access, claiming gadgets were harming my psyche. But I listened. I learned to listen to the house. I heard the fifth step creak, the lock click, and then, an hour later, his return, smelling of earth and ozone, like the air after a thunderstorm. Once, while he was in the shower, I checked his phone. Clean. Perfectly clean. No calls, no messages, browser history empty. But in his banking app, I saw a transaction, a massive sum transferred to a construction company named Monolith. The date matched the day I saw his shadow. 500,000. For what? For a basement renovation he was allegedly doing himself? The answer from Laura came 2 days later as an encrypted message. Yellow capsules are a potent antipsychotic with a sedative effect, used to suppress will and violent psychoses. Not available over the counter. Where did you get this? Eve, run. I read the lines sitting in my car in a supermarket parking lot, tears rolling down my cheeks, hot and angry. He was poisoning me. Methodically, day by day, turning me into a vegetable so I wouldn't interfere. Interfere with what? The second part of Laura's message was even more terrifying. The firm Monolith was liquidated 5 years ago. The account belongs to a private individual. A woman. Barbara K. She's the former chief city engineer, tried for a residential building collapse but acquitted. Barbara. I remembered that name. Roman had mentioned it once in his sleep. That evening, I decided to act. I knew Roman was leaving for a meeting with a client. I went to the hardware store and bought a tiny endoscope camera that could snake into any crack, and a stethoscope. Returning home, I went back down to the basement. Now I knew what to look for. That wall he faced. I pressed the stethoscope to the concrete and froze. There was a sound behind the wall. Not humming, not water. It was breathing. The mechanical, rhythmic hiss of a ventilator. And the beep of a cardiac monitor. The hair on my arms stood up. There, behind a false wall, was a room. And someone inside was alive. I began tapping the wall and found a spot where the sound was hollower. There was a mechanism. I remembered the scratch. I pressed it, trying to slide it, but nothing happened. I needed a magnet or a remote. I started frantically searching the shelves. Roman was a pedant. He would keep everything close at hand. In a box labeled electrical, I found a strange fob, like a garage opener but without buttons. Just a black plastic rectangle. I held it up to the scratch on the wall. A quiet click echoed, and a section of the concrete slab slowly, silently slid aside, revealing a passage into a narrow corridor flooded with sterile white light. The smell hit me, hospital, alcohol, and medicine. I stepped inside, feeling reality shatter into pieces. It was a ward. A fully equipped medical room with a bed, 4 drips, and monitors. A woman lay on the bed. Extremely thin, with pale, almost translucent skin, hooked up to life support. Her hair was cropped short, but I recognized the features. It was the same Barbara K. that Laura had written about. But she looked older, worn out. And she was pregnant. Her belly rose unnaturally above her emaciated body. I clapped a hand over my mouth to stifle a scream. Roman was keeping a woman here. In a coma? Or sedated? I moved closer. The woman's eyelids fluttered. She wasn't asleep. She looked at me with cloudy, unfocused eyes swimming with primal terror. She tried to say something, but the tube in her mouth stopped her. Her hand, bruised from needles, twitched weakly toward me. On the nightstand lay a logbook. Roman's handwriting. Neat, with flourishes. Day 145. Subject stable. Fetus developing on schedule. Drug dosage corrected upward. Eve is becoming suspicious, increased sedation for her. I read it and couldn't believe my eyes. We were both his projects. One, an incubator for his child in the basement, the other, a cover for society upstairs. He couldn't have children with me, doctors said the problem was mine, but now I realized, he lied. He simply chose a different vessel. One more genetically suitable? Or just one he could completely control? Suddenly, the light in the corridor flickered and died. Emergency red lighting bathed the room. I heard a sound that made my blood run cold, the front door opening upstairs. Roman was back. He had received a notification that the secure zone had been breached. I was trapped in a concrete sack with his victim. There was nowhere to run. The only exit led straight into his arms. I looked at Barbara. There was a plea in her eyes. Kill me, they said. Or, save me. I grabbed a scalpel from the medical tray. My hand trembled, but my mind went cold and clear as ice. Fear vanished, burned up in a furnace of hatred. I would not be a victim. I would not be a vegetable. I heard his footsteps in the basement. Eve? His voice sounded disappointed, almost sad. Why did you do this, Eve? We were so close to perfection. He didn't shout, didn't threaten. He spoke to me like a naughty child who had broken an expensive toy. He appeared in the doorway, tall, handsome, gun in hand. Step away from her, he said softly. You don't understand. This is for us. We're going to have a baby, Eve. Your body couldn't handle it, but she owes me. She destroyed my first house, killed my family with her negligent calculations. Now she is building my family with her body. It is justice. His logic was flawless in its monstrosity. He genuinely believed he was right. You're sick, I said, gripping the scalpel behind my back. You're a monster. Roman sighed and raised the gun. I'm very sorry, Eve. I'll have to start all over again. With a new wife. You turned out to be defective. He took a step forward. I knew I had only one chance. I couldn't overpower him physically. But I knew his weakness. His obsession with control and order. I didn't lunge at him, I lunged at the life support control panel. Take one more step, and I shut her off. I screamed, resting my hand on the breaker switch. The fetus dies in a minute without oxygen. Roman froze. His face twisted into a mask of horror. For the first time, I saw him scared. No. Don't you dare. That's my son. Drop the gun. I commanded, feeling the power shift to me. He hesitated. His gaze darted between me and the monitor where the heart of his unborn child beat. Eve, let's make a deal. He began, lowering the weapon. Drop it. I shrieked, and he, gritting his teeth, unclenched his fingers. The gun hit the floor with a heavy thud. I kicked it into the corner without letting go of the switch. And now, I said, looking him in the eye, you will get on your knees and put your hands behind your head. And you will tell me everything. On camera. I nodded toward the surveillance lens in the corner, which I knew was recording everything to the cloud. His cloud. He obeyed, slowly sinking to his knees. In his eyes, I saw the calculation. He was figuring out how to outsmart me the moment I got distracted. But I wasn't going to get distracted. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911, putting it on speaker. 911, what is your emergency? Roman twitched, but I gripped the switch tighter. Address, 14 Forest Lane. Hostage in the basement, illegal imprisonment, medical experiments. Armed perpetrator subdued. I spoke clearly, in official language, cutting off his escape routes. Roman looked at me with hatred mixed with admiration. "You're smarter than you seemed," he hissed. "I underestimated your potential." "You overestimated yours," I replied. When the SWAT team arrived, I was still standing by the switch. Barbara was unconscious but alive. Roman was led out in handcuffs. He didn't resist, only watched me with an unblinking stare, and I knew he was already planning his revenge. But I didn't care. I watched the medics carry out the stretcher with Barbara, watched the police photograph the secret room. My world had collapsed, but I stood on its ruins, alive and free. I gave my statement, handed over the flash drive with the footage, handed over the pills. I turned our entire, happy life inside out, transforming it into evidence. 8 months have passed. I sold the house. I couldn't stay there a single minute. The money from the sale went to Barbara's treatment and her child's rehabilitation. The boy was born healthy. They named him Max. Barbara never fully recovered. She lives in a care facility, but we stay in touch. I moved to a small apartment in another city, changed my number, changed my hair. I work remotely, writing technical manuals. It's quiet, boring, safe. But sometimes, waking up at 3 a.m., I go to the window and look at the street. I think I see a shadow standing under the streetlight. A motionless, patient shadow. I know Roman is in a maximum security prison. He got 20 years. But I also know that prison is just another basement. And sometimes, people get out of basements. I check the locks. I check the cameras. I will never sleep soundly again. But I will never be a victim again. I bought myself a gun. And this time, I won't threaten. I will shoot.